rate of change. So the objective of this video is to determine the average rate of change of a function. So normally this is known as our slope, and when we have a nice straight line or linear function, we can just use the equation given to us to identify the slope. However, when we're dealing with lots of weird functions and we want to find the rate of change from one point, let's say here to here, basically we need to utilize this formula to figure out what the straight line would be to get to that endpoint, taking into account the two functions or the 2 points and the function that we're dealing with. So basically, this is a formula that we will need in order to calculate the average rate of change. So when we're trying to find the average rate of change, we're going to use that formula, the function, and the interval in which we are looking at the function. So this is my interval. So this is basically my A and my B. So we are going to take the function and we're going to plug in our number B, subtract by the function when we plug in our A value, over the interval B minus A. So let's plug in our numbers into our function. I like to use big brackets in between my two functions because it's very easy to get confused what's happening with our two functions and lose a negative. So I am plugging in my B term. So we have negative x to the third. So negative 1 to the third plus 3 times negative 1. That's my first function, minus my second function. So we have negative 2 to the third plus 3 times negative 2. All over the interval negative 1 minus negative 2. So I'm going to clean up my function a little. We have negative 1 to the third power, so that's negative 1, but then we have positive 1. So 1 minus 3 minus negative 2 to the third power, so that's going to give me 2 times 2 is 4, so that's negative 8, but then we have a positive 8, so 8 minus 6, all over one. So now I just have negative 2 minus 2 over 1. So the average rate of change is negative 4. Very simple to do, but very easy to get confused. So you have to be clear and show your steps to avoid confusion. So let's try and do the second one. This is my A, this is my B. So plugging into my function, I have my B term, so negative 1 to the third power plus 3 times 1. Minus, plugging in my 0 is going to give me negative 0 to the third power plus 3 times 0, all over 1 minus 0. So when I clean up my function, I end up with negative 1 plus 3 minus 0 over 1. So I just end up with 2 as my average rate of change. Now you try. Here are two functions. Find the average rate of change over those two intervals. Pause your video, try and do the problem, and then press play to see if your answer is correct. Pause your video now. For the first function, when we plug in the number 3 for the function f of x, we end up with 2 as our answer. And when we plug in a into our function, we end up with negative 4. So we're left with 2 minus negative 4, which is equal to 6, and 3 minus 2, which is just 1, so 6 over 1 gives me 1. So the average rate of change is 6. So when we plug in -3 into the function and simplify, we should end up with positive 15. And when we plug in -5 into the function and simplify, we should end up with 455. So in our formula, 15 minus 455 is equal to -440. And -3 minus -5 is equal to 2. So when we divide, our average rate of change will be -220.